video will cover Excel's VLOOKUP formula, how it works, and practical ways to use it. Really, my goal is to help you increase your technical toolbox to hopefully gain life and work advantages, and really decrease how much manual work you do, and really increase automation and just work more efficiently so you can spend time where it really matters with your family and friends. So let's go ahead and get started. So how does the VLOOKUP function work anyways? Well, programmers are people and they try to logically think like people do. So if you can imagine reading a dictionary and going down looking for a word, so in this case we'll look for collapse, and as we go down looking for the word collapse, when we finally reach it, we're going to look over to the right and read the actual definition. And that's basically the exact same way the VLOOKUP function works. Don't forget to smash the subscribe button, and if you like the content, give it a thumbs up. So the main ways that I use the VLOOKUP function would be to find an item within a large group of data to see if it's there or not, and if it is, to return information on that, so possibly returning a separate column. And two, to compare data sets to make sure that if there's items in one list that I expect to be in another and vice versa, that I use the VLOOKUP function to cross-compare and make sure that they're present in both. So the first parameter or item in the VLOOKUP formula is the lookup value. So this is really asking you, what are you looking for? So you can either use a cell reference or you can actually type in text in double quotations, and this will search for what items you put in there. So imagine yourself walking through the woods looking for a specific tree. The woods would be where you're actually searching for the tree. So in the context of the VLOOKUP formula, that would be the equivalent of the second parameter, the table array. And so the table array is where in Excel you designate where you want to search for the item that you want to look up. So the third item or parameter in the VLOOKUP function is the column index number. And using our previous example, if we were searching for a tree in the woods and we found that tree, then maybe we would want to return information on that tree, maybe the height of the tree or the width of the tree, etc., etc. And so this would actually be the column number of the items that you want to return. So the fourth and final item in the VLOOKUP function is the range lookup. And this can really only be two values, either true or false. And what it's really looking for is, do you want an exact match or not? And so if you use the true, it will not be an exact match, or it cannot be an exact match. And if you use false, it will always be an exact match. And from a practical perspective, I really haven't found anything that I can use the true function for. It returns too many random results. So I recommend always just using the false and returning exact matches or finding exact matches. Although the VLOOKUP function can be an extremely helpful formula, it does have some limitations. So first is that it only returns the first item it finds. So if it's going down a list, like the example we gave with the dictionary, that if you're working down trying to find the word, once you find that word and look over to the definition, if that word was listed twice, it would only ever return the first one. Okay, and so the second would be that it can only search in the first column of the table array that you designate. So it'll always search for the item that you're looking for in the first column. So now that we have an understanding of how the VLOOKUP works and all the components in it, let's go ahead and jump into Excel and test out a couple different examples. Okay, so now let's take a look at the VLOOKUP in actual use. So a couple things to note before that is when we are defining our columns, it's really whatever you want to highlight the columns to be. So in this case, we would be using B through D. And so B would be our first column. So it doesn't necessarily mean A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. It would be whatever columns you're using. The first one that you're using is going to be 1, 2, 3. So in this case, I numbered them up top. Now, if we were going to search for a tree in a list of trees, or search for whatever item in a long list of items and return some information on that, it would be a good way to use the VLOOKUP function. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and say equals VLOOKUP, and then we're going to search for whatever we put in this box right here, or in this cell right here, and then we're going to search our table array. So there's two ways to do this. One would be to highlight the exact area that you want, or you can go ahead and highlight the columns. I typically prefer to highlight the columns, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then let's say we wanted to return the height. So in this case, we're going to say column 2 is what we want to return. And then we're going to say we want an exact match. And that is represented by using the false value. So in this case, you can see that we return a value of 100 feet when we search the redwood. Now, one of the nuances that you need to be ready for when using the VLOOKUP formula is that if you have two items in the list that are the same, so in this case we'll say we have maple, and you can see that there's maple here twice, and so maple's up here and it returns 50 feet, but it never actually goes down the list to search maple the second time. So really, if you have multiple items in the same list, it's only ever going to return the first one that it finds. So it's going to go down the list, find maple, and then return the value, and then that's the end of the function. So that's just something to keep in mind. So another good use for the VLOOKUP function is to compare items from two different lists. So if we wanted to see which items from this list were found in this list and vice versa, we could use the VLOOKUP function. Or you could look it up manually, but that would be pretty time consuming. And so these two lists are just MLB baseball players and what teams they play for. And then I just made a unique identifier. So in the instance where we have two items that could possibly be on the other list, you definitely want to try to use unique identifiers in order to determine what's on one list and what's on the other. So we're going to go ahead and use the VLOOKUP function here, equals VLOOKUP. And we're going to go ahead and search for that unique identifier. And then we're going to search it in these columns over here. And remember, it's always going to search the first column that you highlight. So we're going to go ahead. And then we're just going to go ahead and return whatever items in the first column, which is going to be the same number as the ID number. And then we're just going to make sure that we want an exact match. And if it's not found, then you're going to see it'll give an error. But in this case, I want to copy this down all the way to the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over here. I'm going to see the black plus sign, and then I'm going to drag that down. And what that's going to do is it's automatically going to search for the corresponding ID in the same row. So you can see that it went ahead and went to A5, and it's going to do, and then A6, and so on and so forth. So we're going to go ahead now, and you can see that it did have an error for the items that were not found in the other list. And so now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for this one, VLOOKUP, and we're going to search for the ID on this list. But this time, instead of highlighting the columns, we're just going to go ahead and highlight the actual table array. So we're going to say we're going to look for these items in this table. And then we're going to say we want to look at the columns. So we're going to actually return the same column again. And then we're going to go ahead and say false to make sure it's an exact match. Now the issue with this is since we did highlight the table array, when I go ahead and I drag this down, so there is the plus sign again, and I'm going to grab that with the left click. Oops. I'm going to go ahead and grab that with the left click and drag it down. And so when I do that, you can see that now it kind of acted funky because the actual table array shifted down at the same time. So if I were to highlight this, you can see that the table array continues to shift down. So if I go down here and click this one, you can see it continues to shift. So in order to avoid that, what we want to do is we want to actually highlight the actual table array here and hit F4, and what that's going to do is going to toggle it, and those dollar signs are going to create a permanent reference. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter, and now when we go ahead and copy this and drag it down, so we're going to look for the little plus sign and drag it all the way down. Now we were not going to have that issue. Now the table array is going to stay the same down each item in the row in the column. And so again, now you can see that these items are not found in the other list. So again, it's a good way to kind of compare which items are common between the two lists. So in summary, the main uses for the VLOOKUP function are going to be to find and return items in long lists rather than having to manually look them up, and to compare two lists to see which items are in both lists or which are not present in both lists. And then again, the limitations for the VLOOKUP function is it's only going to return the first item that it comes across, and then the function is going to end. So if you have multiple items, you might need to come up with some other way of looking them up. And then also, it's only going to search the first column that you're searching for an item for. So I would recommend whatever column you're going to search for, always just make that the first in your table. So you might have to just rearrange your table a little bit. But that's one way to kind of get around that nuance. Thanks for watching, and if you liked the video and found it informative, please give it a thumbs up, and please leave any feedback that you have in the comment section below. And I want to know from you all, what else do you guys use the VLOOKUP function for? Please go ahead and, like I said, leave that in the comment section down below. Thanks a lot.